A spectacular Saturday morning to each of you, and welcome to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. The Grizzlies start a very important stretch of games. One against the Dallas Mavericks, then against the Heat, against the Mavericks, again against the Lakers. After a three-game winning streak, the Grizzlies are playing well. They're going to be missing some key pieces tonight as they go on their own against the Mavericks. Myself and special guest Daniel Greer of the Grizz 901 lead, also the Grizz 901 podcast, and the Grizz lead has been kind enough to join us. Daniel, you doing all right today?
I'm doing good, man. How are you, Shawn?
Doing great. What we're going to do is we're going to get started with our catchy theme song here, and then we're going to get right into tonight's matchup with Dallas between me and Daniel. Let's go, Grizz. Here we go.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Even though me and Daniel have only known each other now for probably, I would say, about a year or so, we're so good. We sync up with the right combination of things when it comes to Grizzlies colors. And Daniel, I thank you for getting in the mode here. I appreciate it, sir.
I had to go with the teal.
Yeah.
It looks so good, and I just got this shirt, so I had to show it off.
Yeah, it probably looks good on you. Everything looks horrible to me. You could just ask my wife; she'll agree with that. But anywho, it's a pleasure to have you. I'm gonna call you Bud. I call everybody else Sir. You know, we become close enough. I'm gonna call you Bud. Right. Regardless, it's good to have Daniel. He does a podcast as well for the Grizzlies called the Grizz 901 pod. I am horrible when it comes to podcasts. He's also a part of the Grizz lead as well. Someone that I've enjoyed getting to know. We've had him on the show before, but wanted to welcome him because certainly want to talk about obviously the Grizzlies' recent success, but also discuss obviously what's going to be a very important stretch. So let's set the scene here, Daniel, real quickly. And it's a pretty good scene to set considering a week ago. So a week ago, the Grizzlies lose. Ja Morant, unfortunately, to injury. They get blown out by Atlanta. And then since then, the Grizzlies are 3-0, and they now sit number one atop the Southwest Division as the division leaders and also in the fourth spot in the West. I mean, going back a week ago, Daniel, did you in any way, shape, or form think that things would work out as they have for the Grizzlies?
No, I didn't. And me and my host were talking through really the details of the whole schedule. And we went to the 20th of December. It's kind of what we projected out, and was 13 games. And we said if for some reason the Grizzlies found a way to go 3-10, it's really not that bad. Like looking at the projected schedule, if they would have went 3-10 with those 13 games without Ja Morant, I feel good. Even then, I feel good. And my expectations with that, they would go probably 500, which is still that's still possible, right? It doesn't mean that just because we won 3 games, we'll continue to keep winning. So if they can just hold on to 500, that would be great. But what they're doing right now is so incredible. And I'm happy because as a team, they look like they're having fun.
Oh, agreed. And that's the other big thing about it is you could see this just shows how important Ja is. And I know that there have been some fun discussions about the Grizzlies without Ja, what Ja's impact on winning is. We won't get into this conversation because we want to keep this a family show. But the point that I'm making is that when it comes to the Grizzlies, you're exactly right. One thing that has stepped up is, listen, without Ja Morant, this roster was, for lack of a better way of saying it, backed up against the wall. The defense was going to have to step up. Jaren and others were going to have to step up. And that's exactly what they're doing. But they're relishing not only the opportunity to individually do it, but do it together. And it's great to see players like Jaren step up, but also Desmond Bane continue his breakout season as well.
Yeah, and even that Thunder game, what Bane had 2 points, like it wasn't much of anything. And that was one of those games where I'm kind of glad because what that helps me is when I bet on Bane and his points, then I think it brings the number down a little bit better so I can actually bet on his points because they've been increasing like crazy the last few games. But it's been what I've said the whole time is that if this team can figure out their defensive mentality as well as possibly letting these bench players or these other starters sharpen their offensive skills, then they could be really, really good when Ja gets back. And hopefully that defensive, side with the direction they're going, Ja kind of gets on board with that because I feel like that's been really our letdown. And it's not Ja's fault, right? It's just they haven't found really where they should be defensively. And I think they're finding their groove.
By the way, that Thunder game that Daniel was talking about is when we won the game by 73 points, an NBA record 73 points. That's not 13. That's not 20. That's 73 points. Regardless of all that, I will say this. We talk about players who are stepping up, and it's certainly great to see Jaren Jackson Jr. step up, deliver, be the guy who we hoped he could be, for years now,
right.
Basically. And I know that you can only put so much stock into it, but the way that I put it is that when you look at the perception of Jaren Jackson Jr.'s season at the 10th or 11th game, and now you're looking at it at the 20th, 21st game, it's a night and day difference. He's stepping up, the balance in his scoring. But Daniel, you talked about the defense. He's becoming a two-way difference maker, and it's so much fun to see with how much fun he exudes on the court when he's playing well. It really is kind of like a Dylan Brooks, probably not to that level, but there is a ripple down effect of when Jaren is playing well and he's having fun, the rest of the team's playing loose and having fun and playing well as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that actually helps out his rebounding because he's near the basket more. And even when we've kind of seen Steven Adams go out and Jaren becomes the 5, we're really seeing him stay in more. And because he's playing more the centers, he's actually closer to the basket at times if they're not, a stretch 4 or a stretch 5, allows him to get more rebounds. And I think he's really enjoying that part of it. And I don't think he's ever really enjoyed rebounding, but I think now that he's getting more blocks, he's staying on the floor more. Some of his blocks are when he's literally not jumping. And because his arms stretch out to 15 feet long, it's easy to block people's shots.
15 feet long? You measure that?
I don't know. It looks like 15 feet.
Seems like a bit of an exaggeration. That'd be a record. That'd be a record. Well, and the other thing that I'll say is this is, of course, there's also the next up mentality, which we've been able to see. But it's just nice to see that, you see these other games. I know Jaren had a really good game. I know that Desmond Bain had a really good game as well. But DeAnthony Melton had one of his do everything halves last time, and we'll get into this in just a second towards the second segment. But I do think also that it's great to see DeAnthony Melton eventually find his groove, but Brandon Clark also getting back to rookie Brandon Clark. I think that Anthony Sane of Sports 56 calls it BC before COVID BC, which is a good way of putting it. But it's good to see those young players as well who, we both have talked about before. Them playing well is another layer of success that really boosts the Grizzlies. And right now, it's going to be really important, with potentially some players out tonight and going forward.
Yeah, and hopefully that's not BC because I know he's had some issues. I think it's his right knee. But really what this comes down to is the whole reason they got rid of JV and traded him off was to allow players like Brandon Clark, like Jaren Jackson Jr. to really find, what they're good at and how to really improve with more minutes and more time and more of the offensive load. And I really do believe they're finally taking advantage of that. And Brandon Clark's officially in the rotation for good because he's showing that he can do more than really what he did last year. And he's kind of gotten away from the 3-point shot a little bit. I think if he finds that, that part of his game later in the year, I think that's really where he's going to excel the most. But as of right now, I love his energy. And that's really the reason he's in this lineup.
And I agree completely. Well, I'll tell you something that may give you, myself, or Daniel energy. For instance, Daniel is a huge Tennessee Vols fan. So if he were to find a news source that he wanted to get news on the Vols about, he would probably want to try out a free trial to it. Well, listen, Truebill.com is a great source because for those type of free trials, sometimes they're a business scam, and sometimes they will, without you knowing, start charging you. And so Truebill is a great way for you to save money because it's a place for you to go. You can go to the app, you can upload what subscriptions that you are currently, experiencing, and Truebill will make sure to cancel those apps before the free trial period ends. That way you don't get charged. Again, try Truebill.com, especially if you go to Truebill.com/locked-on/NBA. That's Truebill.com/NBA. You can try it now, and it will allow for you to be able to make sure that those free trial subscriptions do not become ways that you're charged. Again, go to truebill.com/lockedonnba. It could save you thousands. Truebill.com/lockedonnba. Of course, here we're here with Daniel Greer, one half of the Grizz 901 podcast, also part of the Grizz Lead. I believe Ryan Meadows is the other gentleman that you do the show with as well, correct?
Yep, that's correct. Shout out, Ryan.
Yeah. Shout out Ryan. I'd much rather be speaking with him. Of course, I'm kidding. All joking aside, Daniel, for those listeners who have been with us for a while, you probably have heard me talk about the Locker Room app. That's where I hosted my weekly show in the past. Daniel was a very frequent guest of that, but also someone who over the past few years, just as myself, has gotten into covering the Grizzlies, and we become fast friends, obviously being Grizzlies fan, Braves fans, just an all-around great guy. So I'm always glad to have the chance to talk with him. So, Daniel, at least I think I'm always glad to talk with you. Daniel, let's get into, obviously, the big matchup. And these are huge matchups, right? You're looking right now, the Grizzlies are 12-10. The Mavericks stand at 11-10. Half a game difference between 4th and 5th in the Western Conference, and also 1st and 2nd in the Southwest Division. The Mavericks, of course, have been a source of news this offseason going into this season, not so much in terms of on the court, where they really haven't found that big extra piece, though, to support Luka, though Kristaps Porzingis is coming into form a bit this year. But what stands out to you about the Mavericks this year? Jason Kidd at the helm. You obviously have Luka being Luka. But what stands out to you about the Mavericks so far this year that you're going to be looking at in particular from a Grizzlies perspective tonight?
Yeah, just overall, when I look at the Mavericks, I think there's a lot of mistrust. I think there's a lot of unknown, and that's really on their side. And that's really just looking at their lineup usage. Tim Hardaway is now on the coming off the bench. They have Bullock in the starting unit, and there's so much going on, as well as now Jason Kidd saying that Luka needs to stop talking to the refs when they're in transition. He needs to get back and talk to the refs when when there's the ball's out of bounds or in a timeout or whatever. So there's a lot of issues going on with them. So with that, I think there's problems on their side, which that turns around for the Grizzlies. If you can get on a team early in a game that's having issues, whether it's mistrust or just they're not finding their groove or something is going on besides them playing just spot on basketball, you can take advantage of teams. And that's really what I'm looking for is the Grizzlies to continue their first quarter, looking like a good, well-oiled machine. And hopefully this is a 74-point win.
Which would be one better than the current record for biggest win in NBA history, which was set by the Memphis Grizzlies on Thursday, for those who have not heard as of yet. But when it comes to the Grizzlies, you talk about jumping on a team early, and that is something that the Grizzlies have done over these past 3 games that I think is a huge importance. They did it against the Kings, the Raptors. Even though the Raptors was an offensive struggle, the Grizzlies had a big lead going into the second quarter, and then obviously the 73-point win, NBA record, against the Thunder. But the thing is that you're exactly right. It's the ability to get off to that quick start. Have you seen the Grizzlies do that more frequently? We've seen it over the past 3 games, but it seems like shooting the 3, but even more so, finding high percentage shots in the lane. Right. That is going to be a key, because that is one place, getting in the paint, where the Grizzlies have had a lot of success recently. That's one place where the Grizzlies could find some success, especially if both Kristaps Porzingis and Willie Cauley-Stein, who do seem to be within question of whether or not that duo will play tonight, if those two are out, the Grizzlies can find some success in the lane.
Yeah, I agree. And really that comes down to starting off early. In the very first quarter, they're going to Desmond Bane a lot. And he's not just shooting the 3. He's coming off those screens and getting into the lane and shooting those, free throw line floaters. And that's really where the Grizzlies are their best at. It's not when Tyus gets a pick and roll from Steven Adams and kind of just, weasels his way through, the lane and then kicks out or shoots a floater. That's not when they're the best. They're the best when they throw it into Steven Adams and run picks off of him while he has the ball to allow him to facilitate a backdoor screen to Desmond Bane, which is a high percentage shot for a layup. So that's really, if they continue to do that and don't get away from moving the ball, creating, back picks and, screening away from the ball, then that's really where they're their best at. So hopefully they don't fall into a lull like they did against Toronto, where they kind of get to where they're dribbling more and trying to create that off of the dribble. the passing the ball is really where they're so good at, because that creates so much movement and open shots.
You're exactly right. That has been a trend of the Grizzlies when Ja Morant has been out. I think it's 7 straight games that we won without him, and I believe that besides that Toronto game, we've had 29 or more assists in 6 of those 7 wins. So passing the basketball certainly stands out. But I talk about who's going to be out for the Mavericks with Kristaps Porzingis as well as Willie Cauley-Stein. Of course, you're starting to chip in a bit to the Grizzlies' depth as well. They're going to rely on it with Ja obviously being out. Sam Merrill is out. But now Zaire Williams, Kyle Anderson, as well as potentially Brandon Clark. Really hoping Brandon Clark is able to play tonight. But if he's out, now you're starting to get a little bit thin. And it's just true, especially when it comes to length, because there's a lot of length on this Dallas Mavericks team, even without Cauley-Stein and Kristaps Porzingis, Dorian Finney-Smith, Dwight Powell, Maxi Kleber, who you want to watch from shooting the 3. There's a lot of length on, and Luka himself, on this Mavericks team. Without Kyle and Brandon Clark, that's going to make things a little bit dicey at times for the Grizzlies, especially when you get deeper into the rotations.
Yeah, I agree. And Kyle Anderson looks to be out, from my understanding. Grizz PR tweeted that out. So I'm hoping that the Grizzlies can get Zaire back tonight, but they put him out as doubtful as of now, so I wouldn't believe it. But keeping Brandon Clark in the game would be big and beneficial, because we're already going to Xavier Tillman. He's the 10th guy right now. And then you already have Santi Aldama, who played great those last couple of games. So I'm okay. I feel better about Santi playing, but really, if you get past that, then I don't feel good about it. And I don't know if Taylor actually makes a 9-man rotation compared to a 10. But looking on the Mavericks side, Tim Hardaway Jr. went out of that game. He did end up coming back with the right quad, but he could have issues to play on a back-to-back with a quad injury. So that's something else to monitor as well. And who knows, if they're without Hardaway, then that just hurts them even more if they add him to the list.
Yeah, and it certainly will, because, and we'll get into this in the third segment, is that, one thing where the Mavericks do put some emphasis, once again, a team facing the Grizzlies who puts emphasis on shooting the 3. If the Mavericks were beaten without Hardaway or him less than 100%, that could certainly help the Grizzlies' cause. But we talk about Santi Aldama, we talk about Xavier Tillman, especially with Anderson and Clark potentially being, either less than 100% or out themselves. Another thing that steps up to me is Steven Adams, because with Cauley-Stein and Kristaps Porzingis, the Mavericks are pretty decent at limiting offensive rebounds, but Steven Adams, that's where he shines. I feel Steven Adams has certainly shown he can rebound, he can throw the assists. I understand his defense has been lacking this year so far. I think that this is a game where Steven Adams needs to step up. This will be a game where you get a 12, 13, 14, 15 point, overall contributions from Steven Adams, especially converting some of those offensive rebounds. This, to me, is going to be a game where the Grizzlies are going to need to get that possession edge. And one of the ways to do it is Steven Adams converting some of those offensive rebounds into immediate points. If the Mavericks were to be missing their 2 bigs, how big does Steven Adams play into tonight's, results for you, Daniel?
Yeah, so I think it's big, but I don't know if it's on the offensive end per se. And I just don't see Steven Adams being a 15-point scorer, in all honesty. And even with, if you had Willie Cauley-Stein and KP out, I do really like Dwight Powell defensively on someone like, Adams. But that doesn't mean that he can't grab the offensive rebounds. I think having 8 to 10 points from Steven Adams would be good. But including him on the offense, bringing up Powell closer to the free throw line, creates that lane that's open. That's where I really do see Steven Adams being very important. If they can continue to keep going into him, which sometimes they get away from, but if he's having 4 assists a night, that really means that he's opening up the lane and opening up the offense. That's where he's so important. I could see 8 points, 14 rebounds, and 4 assists tonight.
Of course, we'd love to see it. And the thing that I'll say is this, is that, we've talked about the backup personnel for the Grizzlies. We're going to get into, obviously, the 4 main guys, Jaren, Dillon, Bane, Melton. I think as a quartet, you're going to need to get 75 to 80 points at least from that group of four for the Grizzlies to win. We'll get into that in just a second. As you heard earlier, Daniel is someone that enjoys, putting a little bit of money, putting a little bit of wagers out there when it comes to prop bets, when it comes to results, what it may have you. Well, BetOnline.ag is a sponsor for our show, and it is a great place to go. New and updated website. Go on your laptop, mobile device. You put in the promo code Locked On. You get a 50% welcome bonus. You can bet on football, basketball, hockey, whatever you enjoy. BetOnline is a great place for you to go to be able to enjoy everything that you possibly. Was that?
I'm about to sign up.
Great use of props there, Daniel. He did that on his own. Go to betonline.ag right now. Put in the promo code Locked On and get a 50% welcome bonus, just like Daniel did. One more time, Daniel.
Is that easy?
The delay in that was horrible. BetOnline.ag, the best and easiest way for you to be able to bet on sports. Of course, on Monday, I will have a couple of special episodes. I will have, obviously, our regular YouTube episode, just as we are doing here with Daniel. Looking back at the Mavericks game, while also previewing the second game of the road trip against the Miami Heat, and also one of the best minds out there when it comes to the Grizzlies, Matt Herdlicka, will be joining us. It will be for podcast only, but he will be joining us as well for a special edition of Locked On Grizzlies, talking about the Grizzlies season so far, but what can we expect possibly over the next couple of months as we get into trade season? Maybe a season where the Grizzlies may be a bit more aggressive if they continue to play well. But let's get back into how the Grizzlies play well, Daniel. So what stands out to me about the Mavericks is that, of course, you've got Luka being Luka. Jalen Brunson's had a very good season. Tim Hardaway Jr. is who he is. But this is yet another team that does exceptionally well at finding frequent three-point shots, attempting them, not necessarily making them. The Grizzlies have had earlier in the season, before this past week, a lot of teams who came into play against the Grizzlies who were not shooting the three well, all of a sudden found their three-point stroke. But now the Grizzlies have done a better job defending the three. What has changed from what you're seeing? What has changed about their approach in guarding the three, and how important is it going to be tonight?
Yeah, so I'll answer the last part first. It's very important, and I was actually listening to the Locked On Mavericks podcast this week, and kind of want to know a little bit more about the Mavericks and how they're playing. One of the stats that they came up with, I can't remember the guy's name, but he said that they're shooting over 30% when they're wide open, when from three. But if you're within 4 to 6 feet from them, they are shooting under 30% from three, which is big. And what I like now about the Grizzlies defense is that they're within a hand reach, which is 4 to 6 feet of a player. They're not leaving them wide open. And the reason is because they're learning to trust each other. I know that they have the drop big defense that Taylor Jenkins likes, but what they're also allowing them to do is play one-on-one defense. So when somebody's driving to the basket, they're not completely over helping, which creates a guy who's wide open. They're showing, and what I call show and not go is a show defense. You put up a hand, you let them know that, hey, I'm there just in case you want to try to go to the basket. I will block you, AKA Jaren Jackson Jr. And now they're able to get back to their man instead of going so much and creating that double team. So I don't know if that's more because they don't trust Ja and he's smaller, a defender. But that's really what was happening is they were coming and helping out more of Ja's man who was going to the basket. So I love the way they're playing now. They're not actually helping so much, and they're doing the show and not go.
Did you come up with that yourself?
I have a big brain. I don't use it, but I'd use it that one time.
It shows. And that's not going anywhere. Anywho, back to what we're discussing here. So obviously the Grizzlies defending the three is certainly going to stand out. But here to me is also a big thing. You talk about Desmond Bane being able to get going early. And a thing that stands out for me, Daniel, is that I think that that's a big key for the Grizzlies, is that if Kyle Anderson is out, if Brandon Clark is going to be less than 100%, even more falls on the quartet of Jaren, of D'Anthony, Desmond, Dylan, and even Tyus Jones to an extent. I feel that a recipe for success, it's amazing how closely words can sound recipe, remedy, but mean completely different things. Anywho, the thing that I'm getting at is, actually, they don't mean different things. Anywho, but the thing that I'm getting at is starting off shooting the three early.
Yeah.
And then from there, finding success doing that, making the Mavericks move their defense out. If the Grizzlies can find success shooting the three, the weakness of this Mavericks defense is teams being able to get into the lane and score. Because the Mavericks don't turn the ball over at all. They're number one in the league in terms of fewest turnovers committed per game. You're going to have to find the right shot consistently. And if the Grizzlies can find high percentage looks from three early, and then from there work off that to make it easier getting into the lane, that may be a way for their offense to stay consistent.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think this is why they want to get Desmond Bane early involved in the game, because if I feel more comfortable with him shooting the three and making it, pushing out the defense a little bit more, creating that, where they can have those back screens and kind of cuts to the basket. So I think going to him early is the reason that these teams are having to push out more and guarding the 3-point line. And what would be better than hearing you go off against these Mavericks fans and friends when Desmond Bane goes off for 30 points tonight? How awesome would that be?
Friends? I'm kidding. The Mavericks have won for hosts. It would be something like that. I'll just kidding. Lauren Gunn and Nick Angstad, who's on the Locked On Mavericks podcast, Dalton Trigg, Brian Zillow, all of them. You know Brian, obviously, well, from y'all's wrestling podcast, though you don't know wrestling quite at all. Darby Allin's overrated. Anywho, the thing that I'm getting at is that when it comes to this game, besides shooting the three, besides being able to do it again, I do feel that this quartet of players, DeAnthony Melton, Desmond Bane, Dylan Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr., you're going to have to get 75 to 80 points from them tonight. Talked about Steven Adams stepping up, but Tyus Jones also, I think, is going to play a big role in this game. It's not only his ability to be able to prevent turnovers himself with his good assist-to-turnover ratio, but also a big key is him defending as well as him stepping up as a shooter. If the Grizzlies can sit here and get 10-plus points, 5-plus assists from Tyus Jones, it's that extra layer of support to Melton, Bane, Brooks, and Jaren Jackson Jr. that can really, really help out, I feel. I think Tyus Jones could be an X factor in this game.
Yeah, I agree, but I have a question for you. Just looking at the lineup and just the starters that started last game, who does Tyus guard? Because it's not Doncic, right? So who exactly is it? Bullock, Finney Smith, maybe more Finney Smith, but who do you think really he's guarding in this?
You're probably going to look at him guarding the low usage guy, which may be a Bullock, which may be a Finney Smith. To be honest with you, the last time I watched the Mavericks, I would say that Bullock may be the guy because Bullock seems to be more of the, catch and shoot sniper from their starting lineup. So that's probably who I would have him guard. But you bring up a good point in that who are the Grizzlies going to? We talk about the Grizzlies getting off to a hot start. How are they going to align their defense, which they've done so well in doing over the past few games, to prevent the Mavericks from getting off to a good start? But back to Tyus, I agree. You've got to find the right defensive approach, but also the offense as well. Yeah. If he can sit here and coordinate this offense, and the Grizzlies can also get him involved with maybe hitting a few early threes, that'll be a big boost.
Yeah, he's been really good lately about hitting his three-point shot, but also he's trying to get into the lane more with the floater. What that does is that allows, for that under guy, whoever's the weak side big, maybe to come in closer to the lane, allowing for a dump off or, an alley-oop, which is, big for a Jaren and even Steven Adams if they're able to shallow out some. So Tyus is really, he does kind of conduct us, and I'm not saying he's the conductor. Okay, don't get at me. We know that's Conley. But he does conduct this offense, and I like the style because, like I said earlier, it's more of a passing and free flowing. So I really do think that he is very important. And also when Jalen Brunson comes into the game, I think, that could be either DeAnthony Melton or Tyus that's on him. So we'll see. But I do agree with that. Tyus and Adams might be the two biggest key factors in this.
I agree with you. I'm also ashamed of you with you throwing in the conductor there, but I agree with you. And one final thing, and let's be honest, we talk about these X factors, we talk about these lineups, we talk about everything that the Grizzlies are there. Listen, at the end of the day, it typically comes down to the best player on each team. and that's going to be Luka Doncic for the Mavericks and also Jaren Jackson Jr. Jaren Jackson Jr. hopefully can continue how well he's done. But of course, when it comes to Luka Doncic, that is going to be an X factor. Listen, Luka's still Luka, the best young talent in the NBA under 25 at least. But there have been times where he's not been as consistently at the unprecedented high level we've seen him do. And the Grizzlies have had some success this calendar year, and basically, since the start of last year, where especially if Dillon's on him, Luka has not gotten off to great starts. He's torched us in the fourth quarter, of course, going back to that, historic shot that he made to beat us last year, but was so frustrating. But beyond that, the remedy for Luka over the past few games has been slow starts, but then really torching us in the second half. For the Grizzlies, I think that they're going to have to basically, it's kind of a catch-22 because you want to make sure that Luka is not the one that beats you, but you also don't want to sit here and have multiple other guys like a Brunson or a Tim Hardaway Jr. You don't want to have multiple other guys have a huge second half like the Raptors did against us the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So it's kind of a catch-22, but at the end of the day, the focus is preventing Luka as much as possible. And in my opinion, I would just tell Dillon, go be Dillon, and we'll take care of the rest.
Yeah, and that's the good thing now is Dillon is helped a little bit by the less foul calls, the new NBA, I call it. Is because he's now not going to be as big of foul trouble if he watches himself. But Luka, because he is frustrated with the non-calls, that works into Dillon's favor because he can get more into his head more. But Dillon will be a key for that because if he's able to kind of stay on Doncic by himself, that allows the rest of the players to stay on their man because Tim Hardaway Jr. went off and he's been a Grizz killer. And so if we can keep him at bay, I feel good. I don't know if Bullock and Finney-Smith can absolutely just light it up from three. And the other guys, I don't trust their shooting outside of maybe Jalen Brunson. But I think that the Grizzlies have a good chance because of how well they're playing on defense right now and kind of playing on a string, as people want to call it, that they have a good chance. But Dillon Brooks, defensively, this is his game. If he wants to earn first-team defense, is what he's always kind of gone for, this is the game where you have to show out because Doncic is that guy who really could just put in 40-plus points tonight.
It'd be great to see. And of course, against the Mavericks, against the Heat. And then, we've got the Mavericks, the Heat, the Mavericks, and the Lakers before Zach Randolph next Saturday, Zach Randolph's jersey retirement against the Rockets. If we can split those games and starting off with the win tonight, it'll certainly be huge. His name is Daniel Greer. He's been kind enough to join us. Go check him out, the Grizz 901 podcast, as well as the Grizz Lead. Daniel, I know people can find you at Daniel Greer. Where else could they find your work and what else you got going on here in the near future?
Yep. So I have a lot of stuff going on with the Lead Sports Media, who I'm a part of. We just now opened up a new account with Bet the Lead. So that's why I'm kind of more focused on the Mavericks minus 4.5 tonight. I'll take the money line with the Grizzlies at plus 155, just kind of for you all. But we are over at Bet the Lead doing that. We're at Grizz Lead, Grizz_lead. And then you can find me here. So go check out our podcast. I know, Shawn, you want to listen to Shawn's podcast first. Okay. Well, he says the second one's to listen to. You can make me the third. I can be your fourth. I don't care. Just make me one of the top 5, please.
Yep. The Grizz 901 Lead is great with great personalities like Daniel, Ryan Meadows, of course. The great thing about the Grizzlies is you have so many different podcasts you can listen to. Make the Locked On Grizzlies your first. Make the Locked On NBA podcast your second. Make Locked On Fantasy Basketball your third. But listen, we all have time to enjoy as many podcasts as possible. Right. Daniel not only is a great mind when it comes to the Grizzlies, he's a good friend, good dude. We cut up as we've done this entire show because it's fun to do that with people that you care for when it comes to not only that you share fandom with, but also that you enjoy just cutting it up with. So his name is Daniel Greer. Find him at Daniel Greer on Twitter. My name's Shawn Coleman. Find me at StatsSEC, the show at Locked On Grizz. Obviously, the podcast wherever it's available and here on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button below. Listen, review, and subscribe both for the Locked On Grizzlies podcast and the Grizzlies 901 podcast. I got the finger pointing right there. For Daniel Greer, my name's Shawn Coleman. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Go Grizzlies.